I was 42 the day I held a campus ID again, a laminated proof that some part of me hadn't rusted shut. The picture wasn't kind. Too much forehead, a tired mouth. But there was a steadiness in the eyes I recognized from other hard beginnings. My name under it read Michael Carter, student. The word landed with a thud and a small spark. I'd set school aside at 22, when life asked for rent before it asked for reflection. Then came a job that became a ladder, a marriage that became a home, and 2 kids who turned my schedule into a living thing. Somewhere between soccer cleats and overtime, I told myself I'd go back, when things slowed down, as if time ever downshifts on its own. Years piled up like boxes you promised to sort. My unfinished degree sat in one of them, quiet but not dead. Going back started small. An email to admissions written after midnight, the tone half apology, half dare. A placement test I took on a lunch break with coffee that had cooled into honesty. The first tuition payment felt like buying a tool I already knew how to use. I didn't make speeches. I told my wife, Erin, at the sink while rinsing plates. "One night class to start," I said, trying to sound casual. She nodded without looking up. "As long as it doesn't mess with the kids' routines." I said it wouldn't. I wanted to believe that could be true. The kids measured it their own way. Tyler asked if this meant fewer Saturdays at the park. Lily wanted to know if I'd still read the chapter where the dragon finally learns to fly. I told them yes because fathers are in the business of yes until they aren't. Then I bought a used textbook thick enough to serve as a doorstop and a backpack that creaked like a new knee. Night classes tasted like strong coffee and old hope. I sat in rooms with 20-year-olds who moved through formulas the way my hands move through a toolbox, and I learned to take notes like I was being paid for neatness. I worked days, studied evenings, graded my own patience at red lights. There were weeks when I slept in 90-minute pieces and wore pride like a secret under a frayed work shirt. No one threw confetti when I passed statistics on the second try. The house did not change its habits because I was learning again. The dog still needed walking. The dishes still climbed the sink like ivy. Erin developed a look that meant the laundry had opinions. I learned to fold between paragraphs. Every semester I added one more class, like adding weight to a bar you hope won't crush you. I didn't chase a dream as much as I reclaimed an unfinished sentence. Some nights, walking across the dark parking lot with a notebook full of answers that cost me hours, I'd think about the boy who quit to be a man and the man who came back to find the boy's promise. I wasn't chasing youth. I was catching up to myself. The day started before the sun knew what to do with itself. Coffee first, the good mug if it was clean, the chipped one if life was honest. Lunches assembled like small contracts, ham, apple slices, a note for Lily if I remembered, Tyler's sandwich cut diagonal because triangles taste faster. I'd tie my tie in the hallway mirror and catch the face of a man negotiating with time. Work took its usual pound. Emails stacked like bricks, meetings that could have been merciful, a project timeline that treated hours like currency we printed in the basement. I kept a textbook under my desk and ate at my computer, circling formulas with a pen that wrote better than I did. On good days, the math clicked. On others, it was a language I almost spoke. 5:30 was a baton pass. I'd text Erin I'm heading out, and she'd text back Lily's cleats? With the urgency of a fire code. Traffic became a classroom, red lights a study hall. I learned to listen to lectures at 1.25 speed, to pause a professor's sentence when a siren asked me to underline in my head while my hands stayed on the wheel. The parking lot at night had a specific cold, the kind that wakes up the back of your neck and your better intentions. Classrooms smelled like dry erase and ambition. 20-year-olds argued about supply curves with the certainty of people who haven't met a mortgage yet. I took notes like minutes for a meeting with my future. The professor called me Mr. Carter, and for reasons I couldn't explain I sat up straighter every time. I wasn't there to be impressive. I was there to leave with answers. Home again after 9, the house exhaling the way it does when it thinks the day is over. Tyler on the couch with a controller asleep in his hands. Lily a bouquet of limbs under a blanket on the other end. Erin in the kitchen, eyebrows in conversation with a stack of mail. How was class? Good, I'd say, which is what you say when you're too tired to name how proud and how behind you feel at once. I'd carry sleepy bodies to beds that have learned my back tuck blankets, kiss foreheads that smelled like shampoo in school. Then the second shift. Dishes that had waited politely now asked for attention. A quiz posted at 10, due by midnight, because academia assumes night is a spare room. I'd set a timer for 25 minutes of concentration, then 5 to switch the laundry, then another 25 to wrestle an equation into submission. At 12:47 I'd remember the permission slip. At 1:12 I'd remember I hadn't remembered myself. Sleep came in installments. 2 hours on the mattress, one at the desk with my head on my forearm, the last on the couch because the dog believed in company. The alarm at 5:15 felt like a dare. I took it because the day doesn't negotiate, and the dream doesn't either. People talk about balance like it's a pose you can hold. Mine looked more like a carpenter's level I checked a dozen times a day, nudging left, right, shaving a minute here, adding a minute there, trying to keep the bubble from riding the edge. Some mornings, pouring cereal into bowls that clinked like small bells, I'd look at the pile of notes and the pile of shoes and feel the strange comfort of both. The mess meant we were building something. The notes meant I knew why. There's a ledger no one keeps on paper. It lives in the drawer you don't open when company comes. In mine are the nights I traded for credits, the candles I didn't blow out because they weren't on my cake. Tyler turned 12 on a Tuesday, and I was there for pizza, there for the off-key chorus, but not there when the glow-in-the-dark mini-golf started. I left with a kiss to his hair and a promise to make the back nine up to him. He said it was fine. Kids are generous until they learn the exchange rate. We pushed the beach trip twice, then split it like we were dividing a bill. Erin took the kids to her sister's for 4 days in July. I stayed home with macroeconomics and a fan that made the blinds flutter like they were trying to leave too. Photos arrived on my phone. Lily buried to her neck grinning like a lighthouse, Tyler midair over a wave, Erin's feet, and a paperback in frame. I saved them in a folder called Later, as if time were a pantry. Date night became a coupon we never redeemed. We had a jar on the counter with restaurant names scribbled on slips. By spring the paper faded like promises in a window. Once we did go Italian, the kind with tablecloths that forgive spills, and I found myself explaining bond yields between bites because my brain didn't know how to set down the tools. Erin smiled and nodded and asked about the professor with the eyebrows. On the drive home we were quiet in a way that wasn't hostile, just thin. School events turned into parades I watched from the sidewalk of other obligations. I missed Lily's class play where she was a cloud with sequins. Erin sent me a video. Lily floated across a stage the size of a family room, arms wide, face serious about weather. I watched it between questions on an online quiz about elasticity. When I got home she asked if I saw the part where she swirled. I said yes and meant it, but there's a difference between seeing and being seen. My parents came through town once, and we orchestrated dinner like a hostage exchange between my shift at work and an exam review. My father said, "Proud of you, son," in the doorway as I left, which is where the compliment had to live because the table had a limited number of chairs, and time had already claimed 2. There were smaller losses that don't get ballots. Saturday mornings that used to belong to pancakes became office hours at the kitchen table. The late-night walks with the dog where Erin and I used to solve the world went to a problem set that didn't know about neighborhoods. Even my body kept score in quiet ways, knees stiff from too much sitting, a back that learned the shape of a borrowed chair, a face that forgot to laugh at the right places in sitcoms because I was counting lines left to read. People told me it was a season, that sacrifice has a harvest. I believed them most days. On the other days, I folded another load of laundry at midnight and wrote my daughter a note for her lunchbox that said "Proud of you, Sky." She asked why sky. I said because clouds need somewhere to float. She laughed and put the note in her pocket like a coin. That's how we paid for things we didn't talk about. Little slips of paper that said we were still here, even when one of us wasn't. The email came at 6:12 a.m., the university seal like a stamp on a long letter finally reaching the right address. "Commencement information," subject line said, and my heart did the small jump it saves for sirens and good news. I read it at the counter with a good mug in my hand, steam curling up like a benediction. Caps and gowns available for pickup next week. Guest tickets limited to 6. Arrive 1 hour early. Pomp and circumstance implied, not stated, like a secret handshake. For weeks after, The date lived in the house the way holidays live. You don't say Christmas every morning, but the lights are in a grocery bag in the hallway and everyone walks around them like anticipation. I put the ceremony time on the calendar in 3 places. One of them a sticky note on the fridge that said simply, "We made it." Erin raised an eyebrow. "Manifesting?" she teased. "Maybe," I said, and tried not to sound like a man who'd been carrying this finish line in his pocket so long it wore the fabric thin. I pictured it the way people picture houses they haven't moved into yet. The arena's echo, the way sound stacks when it's dressed up. Erin in a dress she likes but doesn't say out loud she likes. Tyler pretending not to care, and then caring anyway when my name gets called. Lily standing on her seat because she's short, and the world often is. I imagine the whoop Tyler would deny later, and the bouquet Lily would insist on holding like she'd won something too. I imagine a photo, me in a square hat that never looks good on anyone, surrounded by faces that make it look good anyway. I booked a table at a restaurant with portions hearty enough for victory. Put down a deposit that felt like betting on myself. Told my parents the date, told my sister, told the guys at work who nodded and said, "About time," with the kind of grin you give a ship finally clearing the harbor. I took Lily with me to pick up the gown. She touched the fabric like it might hum. "It's like a wizard coat," she said. "You're not wrong," I said, and thought of all the spells I'd cast to keep daylight long enough. At night I practiced the walk in my head, the choreography everyone pretends they don't rehearse. Stand, row shuffles like a deck of cards, stairs, the dean's handshake, the photo where you try to make pride look photogenic, back to the seat where your legs remember tension and your heart learns relief. I planned stupid details I had no business planning, where we'd park, which entrance had the shortest security line, whether Tyler would be less bored if I handed him my phone with a scavenger hunt of things to spot in the crowd. 3 tassels, 1 crying dad, a sign with glitter that says you did it, Maria. The kids half listened when I talked about it, the way kids do when time still has elastic. Erin listened fully, which felt like a chair pulled out for me. She asked what I wanted to wear under the gown, the good shirt, the one that forgives sweat. If I wanted to invite the neighbors, Dorothy cries at everything, that would be nice. Whether we should Uber so we could all celebrate properly, I said we'd see. I meant yes. I ordered extra tickets just in case anyone woke up that morning more proud than busy. Finals came and went like weather. Some days I was a roof, some days a mop. Grades posted in a neat little row of letters that spelled out a word only I could hear. That night, alone at the kitchen table, I slid the diploma frame out of its box and set it where I could see it from the sink. The glass reflected the light the way water does when it decides to be a mirror. I imagined my family's faces in that glass after the ceremony, my name inside it, and the noise around us finally matching the noise inside me. On the fridge, Lily added a stick figure drawing without comment, me in a square hat, arms up, 3 squiggles labeled crowd. In the corner, she wrote "Go Dad" in letters that tried to be big. I stood there longer than a man should stand at a refrigerator, letting the cold air hit my knees, feeling how close the horizon had moved. Some dreams you chase until your lungs burn. Some you walk toward every night carrying the groceries. Either way, there it was, the line, the crossing, the sound I'd been borrowing from the future. Almost here. Almost ours. The ticket portal opened at noon on a Wednesday, and I sat at my desk at 11:57 like a man trying to buy back time. When the counter hit 0, I refreshed and clicked with the seriousness usually reserved for mortgage rates. 6 seats flashed available. I took them all. 2 for Erin and the kids, 2 for my parents, 2 for just in case, because Hope likes company. I printed the confirmations and slid them into a folder labeled commencement like I was filing a building permit. At lunch I called my parents. My mother answered on the second ring with a voice she uses for holidays and medical news. I gave her the date again, the address again, said the word proud in a sentence I hadn't said out loud to them since I was 19. "We'll look at flights," she said, which is not a yes but is not a no. My father got on and asked about parking, the way men of his generation ask about feelings. I told him I'd send a map. At home that night, I lined the tickets on the kitchen counter like place cards. Erin glanced at them while stirring sauce. 6? She asked, the way someone asks the weather when they're thinking of shoes. "Parents," I said. Maybe your sister if she wants, or Dorothy from next door. She cries at everything. She'd love it. Erin smiled without using her teeth. Let's make sure the kids have snacks if it runs long. Logistics turned into a quiet hobby. I booked a table at an Italian place that forgives celebration, left a deposit that felt like carving our names in wet concrete. I found a decent rate at the downtown hotel for my parents, emailed them the reservation, and a list of nearby coffee shops, because my mother travels better if she knows where she can correct a morning. I bought Tyler a button-down that wouldn't itch and told Lily she could make a sign if she kept the glitter to a county-approved level. She started sketching thumbs-up hands with enthusiasm that made the dog nervous. In the evenings I did a rehearsal that looked like a dad cleaning a junk drawer. Portable charger in the bag, tissues, a small bottle of water because arena air dries pride out of a person. I checked the camera, charged the battery, then remembered I probably wouldn't be the one taking pictures. I wiped the frame I'd set on the mantel and imagined it holding a future instead of packing dust. There were hairline cracks if you knew where to look. My mother texted a link to Derek's backyard remodel. Isn't the pool lovely? He's having everyone over mid-month. And I replied with a thumbs up and a calendar screenshot that felt louder than a paragraph. Erin asked if her sister's brunch was the same morning. They're flexible, she said, which can mean either direction. Tyler asked how long the ceremony would be in. Real hours. And when I said 3, he did the math on his face and didn't like it. Lily wanted to know if air horns were allowed. I told her no, and then pictured one anyway. Still, I could see it when I laid out the tickets, 6 little doors to the same room. I wrote names on sticky notes and placed them on top like promises. Erin, T.Y., Lily, M.O.M., Dad, Extra. I put the stack back in the folder, and the folder in the drawer where important things go, and junk mail dreams of living. Before bed, I taped the parking map to the fridge with the magnet Lily made in kindergarten, the one that looks like a star if you squint kindly. The house hummed. The tickets waited. Planning wasn't magic, but it was the closest thing I had. Small rituals convincing the future to come sit where I'd set a chair. It started the way dry rot starts, quiet, behind paint. Erin was wiping the counter after dinner, slow circles that meant her mind was somewhere with better light. The tickets were tucked under a magnet on the fridge, the Italian reservation card pinned beside them like a small flag. She glanced up, not at me, at the paper. We should plan snacks, she said, voice airlight. 3 hours is a long day for the kids. Long day, I repeated, like a student learning pronunciation. I pictured Lily's sign, Tyler's shirt, the map I'd taped at a perfect right angle. We'll make it work. She rinsed the sponge and set it down like you set down a thought you don't want to claim. My sister mentioned doing a brunch that weekend, she added, casual as weather. Everyone's schedules are bananas. There's talk of moving it to Saturday, maybe even Sunday, if that's easier for people. The sentence had the careful vagueness of someone measuring distance without a ruler. It's Saturday, I said, and heard how useful a fact can pretend to be. Ceremony's at 2. She nodded, the way you nod at an airplane you hope will land on time. We'll see, she said, and dried her hands. The kids did their own math out loud. Tyler, thumbing his phone, asked, Do we have to, sit the whole time? Because Coach said we might have a scrimmage with the Royals. Could be sick. Lily wanted to know if there'd be cotton candy because there was at the hockey game, and weren't arenas basically cousins? I told him no cotton candy, yes snacks, and the Royals would still exist in the evening. Tyler shrugged an I heard you that didn't commit to meaning it. Little comments began to collect like lint in the corners. I found myself pre-answering problems no one had officially raised. I printed an updated parking plan and slid it under the magnet. I bought chews and quiet snacks, a sacrament of practicality. I told Tyler the arena had Wi-Fi, and that 3 hours was 9 YouTube videos long if he rationed. I told Lily she could bring markers as long as they had caps that respected upholstery. Erin said she'd check on carpool swaps for the scrimmage and used a tone that can mean anything from of course to I'm already somewhere else. The night before the RSVP deadline for my parents' hotel, I asked Erin if her sister had picked a brunch day. She was sorting mail, envelopes fanned like a magician ready to fail me. There's been some back and forth, she said. People are just really busy lately. Busy was a fog that moved in every room and made all the furniture look optional. When the house went quiet, I stood at the fridge and straightened the ticket stack just because my hands needed to make something right. The magnet clicked back into place. In the reflection on the oven door, a man adjusted a paper he couldn't force anyone to care about. I told myself this was pre-event jitters, the human version of wind before rain. But even a calm man can smell weather. Somewhere past the paint, the wind had started to change. The last week felt like a tunnel with its own weather. The cap and gown hung on the closet door like a promise you could touch, and the dining table disappeared under a topography of deadlines. Laptop, notes, a mug that forgot to be washed, a stack of articles bristling with flags like porcupine quills. I lived in sprints. 25 minutes of focus, 5 to remember water exists, then back under. Final project 1 was a case study that started polite and turned feral the deeper I went. I built models until the spreadsheet looked like a city from above, cells lit up like windows, formulas running underneath like subways. When the numbers balanced, a small warm thing uncurled in my chest. Final project 2 was a presentation the professor insisted we narrate on video. I recorded at midnight to dodge household noise, whispering into a webcam like a man confessing to a future employer. On take 5, I stopped gesturing with my pen because the click bullied the microphone. Erin moved around me like a weather system that had learned my barometer. She set a plate by my elbow and didn't ask me to describe yield curves over chicken. The kids orbited, Tyler asking if I knew where his cleats were without really wanting me to, Lily leaving a drawing that said "You got this" in bubble letters so ambitious one of them had a flat tire. The house kept its rhythms. Washer thudding the way it does when you put everything off then try to clean a week and a night. The dog sighing at an invisible problem. Between paragraphs, I let myself watch a clip of graduation some stranger posted from last year. Grainy, badly framed. You could barely hear names. But you could see the moment. Person walks, handshakes. The split second where their face opens in a way it won't again, because firsts only happen once. I paused on that face, the way relief and pride share a room, and then I pictured my row, my shoes, the sound of my name traveling through a space that had never carried it like that. Sleep happened where it could. I woke once at 3:11 with a sentence in my mouth and typed it in the notes app before it could evaporate. At dawn, I stood in the doorway and looked at the gown again. The zipper glinted like a joke about dignity. I imagined Erin and the kids in the stands, Tyler trying not to smirk when I did the tassel thing, Lily's mouth forming a perfect O when the confetti cannon goes off in her imagination even though there won't be one. I imagined my parents, my father clapping the way men clap when their hands have worked for a living, my mother's eyes wet against her will. On the last night, I clicked submit on the final file and stared at the confirmation screen until I was sure it wouldn't take it back. The house was quiet in that end-of-day way where even the fridge hummed softer. I shut the laptop and the room looked different, like someone had moved a wall. I went to the closet and touched the sleeve of the robe, half expecting it to spark. In bed, Erin rolled toward me, her hand finding my shoulder. "Done?" she asked into the dark. "Done," I said, and it wasn't just about the file. I lay there listening to the furnace breathe and let the horizon come all the way to the door. In my head I walked the stage once, careful and certain, and somewhere in the stands, clear as a bell I chose to hear, I heard my name shouted by the voices I'd been doing this for. I slept like a man who had carried a thing a very long way and set it down exactly where it belonged. We ate late because the last practice ran long and the rotisserie chicken from the grocery store forgave lateness. Tyler carved off both drumsticks without ceremony. Lily sprinkled too much salt with the authority of a chef who has never met high blood pressure. Erin lit a candle she saves for guests, which is how I knew she wanted the table to behave. Conversation did the usual tour. Homework, a mean Tyler pretended not to find funny, Lily's science project where plants listened to music. I was halfway through telling a story about a professor who wore 2 different shoes when Erin said, almost to the plate, "My sister texted. She's thinking of doing something for her birthday this weekend." "Nice," I said carefully, as if the word were fragile. "What day?" "She's being loose with it," Erin said, slicing the chicken into squares like we were feeding a toddler. "Brunchy maybe, open house, come and go vibe. People are so busy. Could be Saturday or Sunday. She's trying to make it easy for everyone." The air moved in the space after Saturday, the way air moves when a door almost shuts. Lily asked if Aunt Jess would have the chocolate cake with the fudge frosting that makes your teeth sing. Tyler asked if there'd be a pool. Erin said, probably, to both, which is her way of saying no one will be unhappy on my watch. I took a sip of water and felt the glass heavy with what I didn't want to put in it. The ceremony's at 2, I said, because facts are my favorite furniture. We should be out by 5. Dinner after. We can swing by Jess's in the evening, if it's still going. I tried to make logistics sound like kindness. Erin nodded the way you nod at a neighbor across the street. We'll see what time people are dropping in. She reached for the salt and didn't use it. The kids adjusted their plans in real time, like weather apps. Tyler said Coach mentioned a scrimmage, maybe, in the morning. He could hit, maybe, twice in a sentence without moving his mouth. Lily wanted to know if she could wear her sparkly shoes to both things because they're basically neutral. Erin refilled the water glasses as if thirst were the primary problem. After the plates were tired, I stacked them by the sink and let the hot water run until the steam erased the candle's smell. Erin dried, her towel decreasing in slow inches. Jess hasn't done a birthday thing in years, she said, light, like small talk. It would mean a lot to her if we showed face. I want that for her, I said, which was true. I also want my family in the room when my name gets read. The sentence sat there like a coat on a chair no one wanted to claim. She turned the towel over, a new dry square. Of course, she said, and the word had more letters than usual. We'll make it work. Then, softly, it's just a lot in one day. I nodded, because it was. The house held our compromise, like a glass holds a hairline crack, structurally fine if no one taps it. We packed lunches for the next day, as if that were the only thing tomorrow asked of us. Later, in bed, I could feel the calendar shifting under the sheet like a tide. I placed my hand on the fabric and told myself tides are predictable. Even when they're not, the shore remains. I repeated the ceremony time in my head until numbers felt like prayer, and slept in the shape of a man trying to keep a room ready without putting a sign on the door. I woke before the alarm because some mornings don't need permission. The house was the kind of quiet that makes you notice your own breathing. I shaved slow so I wouldn't nick the day, then ironed the good shirt until it remembered it was good. The tie, navy with small dots Lily once called stars, went on with the muscle memory of interviews and weddings and one funeral that taught me how to stand still. In the mirror a man looked back who had decided too many times to keep going and had run out of good reasons not to. Downstairs, sunlight posted itself on the kitchen floor in tidy squares. I put on coffee, the good mug, because ceremony begins at home. The cap and gown hung from a cabinet knob like a joke about fashion. I checked the folder with the tickets again even though paper doesn't forget. 6 small rectangles, a seating chart for pride. I tucked them into the inside pocket of my jacket where important things ride close. I expected the morning to swell with kid noise, ties thudding to scent, Lily rehearsing her sign in the hallway, Erin moving in efficient lines. Instead, the house held its breath. I poured cereal into 2 bowls anyway because habits are how you keep faith with people you love. The clock watched me at the pace clocks always watch. Upstairs a door opened, then shut, the soft kind that means someone's trying to keep peace. I went to the bottom of the stairs and called up gently, Team Carter, rise and shine. Big day. The words climbed but didn't bring anyone down. I stood there a second longer than a man should stand at stairs, and then went back to the kitchen to fuss with nothing. Erin appeared finally, wrapped in a robe that meant we were still in before. She smiled in a way that tried to be full and landed neat. You look handsome, she said, and kissed my cheek like a good luck charm. How's the schedule? I asked, lighter than the question deserved. She glanced toward the hall. Ties wiped from last night's scrimmage. Lily was up late finishing Jess's card. I'm letting them sleep a few more minutes. We've got time. We did have time, on the clock. In my chest, the minutes felt more expensive. I set the cap on the counter, and smoothed the gown's shoulder as if it were a child's hair. We should leave by 12:30 to park on the lower level, I said, hearing myself sound like a brochure. I printed the map. Erin nodded, poured coffee, took a polite sip, set the mug down in exactly the ring it would make. I'll rally them, she said, and drifted back down the hallway like a weather report. I walked to the fridge and looked at Lily's drawing, me with the square hat, 3 squiggles labeled crowd, go dad in brave letters. I could hear the arena in my head, the first notes of the march that always sounds both ridiculous and right. I tightened the tie knot one click in the reflection of the oven door. The man in the glass looked ready to be seen by the people who taught him to want to be. 10 minutes passed. Then 10. The house kept being quiet, the particular quiet of a room with a conversation in it that hasn't started yet. I packed the backup snacks, slipped the portable charger into my pocket, checked for tissues because pride likes to surprise you. At 11:28 I climbed halfway up the stairs, hand on the banister. "Ty! Lil? Time to get dressed," I called, careful, cheerful. A muffled, "yeah," came back from behind a door, the kind of agreement that does not stand up. Erin reappeared with her hair twisted up, and a look I recognized from mornings when plans learn about gravity. "Working on it," she said softly. I nodded like a man nods to keep the day moving. I picked up the gown, felt its weight like paper made heavy by meaning, and slid my arms into it. In the mirror by the door, the hat made me look ridiculous in the specific way accomplishment asks you to be. I smiled anyway, practiced the tassel in my head, and listened for the sound of my family becoming footsteps. The clock said we were fine. The quiet said something else. I picked up the keys and waited for the house to choose. The arena had that polished echo that makes every shoe sound like an announcement. Ushers and blazers pointed with the soft authority of people who heard hope for a living. I checked in, got a name card with a clip, and followed my row like a river finds the low ground. Before taking my seat on the floor, I walked the long curve of the lower bowl until I found section 112, row G, seats 3 through 8, my 6 little rectangles of intention. I set programs on each, folded the corner the way Lily likes, slid granola bars under 2 like secret agents. Then I stood for a second and pictured them filling in, coats off, cheeks pink from the march outside, Erin smoothing her dress with both hands, the kids arguing about who gets aisle. The brass started warming up, that thin pre-music that sounds like a room remembering how to sing. Students flowed in black rivers down the aisles. I took my place on the floor and turned in my seat to look back. Section 112 was a patchwork of faces and signs. Congrats, MOM. In glitter, go Kevin with an alarming amount of neon. Row G had a couple with matching shirts, an older man gripping a bouquet like it might take off, an empty space where my family lived in my mind. It was early. People get snarled in parking lots in life. I checked my phone. No new messages. I typed, "We're in 112 row G," and didn't send it because I had sent it last night with a map and 3 exclamation points to hide the plea inside them. The lights dimmed politely. The procession began. The first notes of the march rose, like an old joke everyone still laughs at. I turned again. The programs I'd placed stayed folded like small tents in a windless field. Speeches do what speeches do. The university president thanked the donors, the dean talked about grit, an alumna told a story about a failure that became a company, and the crowd gave the reliable ooh when she said the number with enough zeros. I clapped. I turned and looked. A family arrived mid-speech, breathless, filling seats 2 rows behind. A toddler in a tiny blazer waved a flag at no one in particular. In my row, someone dabbed eyes. Section 112, row G stayed tidy and undisturbed, the granola bars like props in a play that got cut. I told myself they'd slide in right before the names. Timing is an art. I've seen Erin stick landings. My phone buzzed once, a promotional email pretending to be important. I silenced it and slid it back inside my gown where my heart was already loud enough. Names started. A river of syllables. Applause that swelled and thinned like weather. Every so often, a pocket of noise. A family with a foghorn of love. A mother stood to shout her son's middle name, as if she were pushing him into the world again. A father's whistle cut the air in a straight line. I twisted disc in section 112 so many times the chair creaked. The seats I'd saved held only the shape of waiting. When they got to my college, my row rose with that group awkwardness that makes a unit out of strangers. We shuffled forward, the line of zipper closing toward the stage. I stood on the stairs and glanced up one last time, bargaining with the universe for a miracle of late arrival. An usher slid by, smiling the neutral smile of a person paid to be there for everyone and no one. The programs in row G kept their corners folded like obedient children. Michael Aaron Carter, the reader said, and there it was, my name amplified, round and official. I walked, shook the dean's hand, felt the brief press of a document in a case that would be empty until the mail caught up. The camera flashed. The applause was the polite kind given to a man the room doesn't know, indistinguishable from the applause for the names before and after. I tried to put my own people's noise in it, and couldn't quite. Back in my seat, tassel shifted, I let the roar of other people's joy wash over me, and do what it could. Across the way a girl held up her phone to film her father crying. A cluster of friends high-fived so hard they hurt. Section 112 blurred a little, then sharpened like a mean trick. 6 empty chairs sat in a neat row under a banner that said congratulations in letters big enough to reach me. I sat very still in a crowd that moved and felt how loud silence can be when you've saved it a place. The stage looked shorter from the seats. Up close, it was a small hill with lights at the top, the kind that flatten faces and make everyone look briefly made of paper. A marshal touched my elbow the way you steer a shopping cart, and I moved with the line until the floor became stairs, and the stairs became what that had heard 1,000 names and forgot none of them. There's a choreography they don't teach. Left hand on the rail, right hand on the little card so the reader doesn't botch your vowels, eyes forward but not too forward, breathe in the half-second where you are nobody and everybody, then step into the box of light. Someone ahead of me stumbled and recovered with a grin the crowd loved. I wished for a stumble just to have a story, then hated myself for the wish. Michael Aaron Carter, the reader said again, as if reminding the room and me who I had been this whole time. I walked to the dean, who'd shaken the day into muscle memory hours ago. His smile was practiced kindness. His grip was firm enough to anchor me to the moment. The diploma case touched my palm with that imitation leather texture every accomplishment wears, and I turned to face the camera in the aisle. I arranged my mouth into what passes for pride when you're improvising. The applause rose, the way applause does for a person who has not invited anyone to clap louder. It filled the air at a socially acceptable volume, and then made room for the next name. I had imagined finding Aaron's eyes there, a kid's sign bobbing below it, a ridiculous tear on my father's face, my mother's hand to her chest because hearts do what they want. Instead, the camera's flash was my only witness, a brief artificial sun that didn't warm anything. I stepped off the stage and felt gravity return like a joke shared by flooring. Back in the aisle, a staffer pointed me down the right lane, and I followed a young man who whooped under his breath and wiped at his eyes with the edge of his sleeve. My smile slid off when no one was looking. I tucked the case under my arm the way you carry a book you mean to finish and sat. From the floor the stands looked like a mosaic someone hadn't finished, bright patches of banners and faces, and the small clean hole of 6 empty chairs I'd set a table for in my head. I let my eyes rest there until it hurt, then looked away at a stranger's celebration and borrowed a little. A girl in the row ahead of me mouthed I did it to the ceiling. A man 2 seats over pressed his lips together like he was swallowing a hymn. They told us to move the tassels, and the room turned a field into a breeze. Caps went up where they were allowed to, then rained down like promises that didn't check wind speed first. I kept mine on because some things you hold when other things won't hold you. The band hit the march again, brass bright as tin cans in sun, and we rose in our rows. A sea taught how to leave shore in lines. On the way out, I glanced one last time at 112, row G, as if a miracle might be late. The programs I had folded waited with their small, obedient corners, granola bars unclaimed, a kindness that had no mouth to say thank you. I put my hand on the case and gave myself the congratulations I'd saved for their voices. It sounded different, thinner, but it was true. Sometimes, the thing you carry across the stage isn't a degree. It's yourself. Outside, the wind off the parking structure had a stadium's leftover cheer in it. Graduates clustered in islands, hugging, arranging themselves into photos that would do more remembering than they could. I stepped out of the stream and stood by a concrete pillar where the cell signal was supposed to be better, the diploma case under my arm like a polite animal. I dialed home first out of instinct, then Erin's cell when the house rang itself into nothing. She picked up on the 3rd ring with the brightness people put on when they want a conversation to land light. "Hey! How'd it go?" "It went," I said, and heard my voice come back thinner than I meant. "Where are you?" At Jess's, she said, as if the words didn't have edges. Music came through faintly, pop song clapping. It turned into a whole thing. People brought way too much food. The kids are having a blast. I was looking for you in the stands, I said, keeping it neutral like a waiter confirming an order. Section 112. Row G. A pause, small and busy. Right. We tried to make it, but the traffic by the bridge was insane and Ty's stomach was being weird, and Lily spilled glitter on her dress, and anyway, we figured we'd be in the way if we came late. We'll see you later, okay? We can do a nice dinner tonight or tomorrow, whatever's less crazy for you. Across the plaza, a girl took a photo with both parents kissing her cheeks. She laughed the way you only laugh in the middle of being held. I watched the moment fix itself onto pixels, and wondered how long the joy in it would stay warm. Later, I repeated, as if I were new to the word. The reservation's for 6. Perfect, she said, happy to agree to a future where the present wasn't. Text me the address again? Jess wants the kids to do cake soon, and then we'll head out. So proud of you, Mike. Really? Thanks, I said, and the syllable felt like a coin that didn't buy anything. Put Lily on? There was shuffling, a laugh away from the microphone, be careful with the knife, and then Lily's breath right up against the speaker. Dad! Aunt Jess got the good frosting. My tongue is basically singing. Save me a note, I said, because jokes are bridges. You okay? I made you a sign, but the tape was being a bully, she said. Ty says hi, but his mouth is full of chips. When are you coming? I looked down at the gown sleeve, at the crease that would iron out later if I tried. Soon, I said. I'll see you tonight. Aaron came back on. We gotta cut the cake. Send me a selfie in your hat. Love you. We'll see you later. The words stacked up neatly, a little tower of intentions that didn't touch the ground. After the call ended, the phone showed me my reflection first, then the black screen emptied of names. Around me, strangers practiced belonging with their people. I stood a minute longer than a man needs to stand by a pillar, then lifted the phone again and took the selfie Aaron asked for. The cap sat wrong. The smile sat worse. I sent it anyway with a caption that read, "Made it," and turned toward the garage where my car was waiting patiently, the only thing that had kept my exact place all afternoon. The plaza turned into a moving album, caps tilted, arms draped, flowers held like small trophies. Everywhere I looked, people were making proof. A girl in red heels lifted one foot and leaned into her mother's kiss while her father tried to figure out the portrait mode. A boy in a wrinkled gown buried his face in a bouquet and came up laughing, pollen on his nose like confetti that forgot to float. A herd of uncles practiced the same joke at different volumes. The band from inside had bled into somebody's Bluetooth speaker, and the song that came out didn't belong to the university, but it did the job. I stood with my diploma case tucked against my ribs and adjusted the mortarboard that refused to respect geometry. A stranger caught my eye, older, maybe 60, the look of a man who had once lifted things for a living. He nodded the way men nod when they recognize sweat under a collar. Want me to take one for you? He asked, already holding out a steady hand. I handed him the phone because reflex is polite, stepped back, squared my shoulders, and tried on a smile that would read as grateful later. He took 3, careful, no fingers in the frame. Got it, he said, and returned the device like a good tool. I thanked him more formally than necessary, and he went back to the young woman who called him Dad and wore joy like a new jacket. I scrolled the pictures under the shadow of a maple that had not been asked to witness anything. In each, the space beside me tried to be unobtrusive and failed. You can crop loneliness out, but it leaves a seam. I almost deleted the set, then didn't. They were true, and I was starting to learn the cost of throwing away true things. Near the fountain, a cluster of friends counted down and launched caps into the air like baby birds. One went crooked, landed in the water, and the whole group shrieked as if joy had a volume knob. A woman in a bright scarf held up a sign in glitter that said, "We knew you could," and the graduate she was aiming at it cried with her mouth open, "Unpretty and perfect." I watched the way their faces changed around accomplishment, how it made room for everyone who'd carried a corner. My phone buzzed with congratulations from co-workers who had never met my kitchen sink. Linda sent a picture of cupcakes in the break room with my name written in messy icing and a caption. "We saved you too. Hurry back Monday so we can pretend we aren't eating them." The text landed warmer than the forecast. I walked the edge of the crowd and caught reflections in windows. Me in the hat, me out of the hat, me with the case tilted just so, me trying not to look like a man inventorying other people's happiness. A pair of grandparents asked me to take a photo of their family. I held their phone high, counted to 3, and pressed the button for them like I was stamping a passport. "One more," I said, and meant it. On the way to the garage, I passed a boy sitting on the curb, gown puddled around his sneakers, his forehead against his knees. His mother crouched, whispering steady into his hair. I didn't need their story to understand its shape. Some victories arrive tired. Some need a hand on the back between breaths. At the car, I set the diploma case on the passenger seat and buckled it because habits have a sense of humor. The mirror showed me a man without the hat now, lines deeper, eyes clear. In the glass I tried the sentence I hadn't heard yet. "Congratulations, Michael." It sounded homemade, which is to say it held. Then I turned the key and let the engine give me a sound that didn't depend on anyone else to start. The front door was propped with a shoe, the way we did when people moved in and out like weather. Music leaked down the hallway, bass low enough to make the picture frames breathe. Laughter rose in bursts, the kind that comes from inside jokes with fresh confetti. I stepped over a pile of shoes, flip-flops, cleats, a pair of heels Erin wears when she wants to look like she didn't try, and set the diploma case on the console table where keys and mail go to become official. The living room had been rearranged for Joy. Jess's birthday banners sagged cheerfully between two corners, balloons tethered to a chair like obedient moons. Tyler was at the snack table shoveling chips with the focus of a man who lost a battle with willpower and decided to enjoy the surrender. Lily wore a paper crown that said Queen in gold letters. Glitter was in her hair like stardust or evidence. Erin stood near the kitchen island, plastic cup in hand, laughing at something Jess said with her whole face. They looked like a magazine ad for Normal. "Hey!" Erin spotted me over someone's shoulder and lifted her cup in the universal sign for later. "How'd it go?" she called, as if I'd come back from a run. "It went," I said, and my voice did that thing voices do when they don't want to make a scene in a room that's already a scene. I raised the diploma case slightly, a toast to myself, and set it back down as if it needed to cool. Jess air-kissed in my direction, one arm still around a friend from yoga. "Graduate," she sang, then turned back to the cake where a knife debated between pieces. Tyler looked up long enough to do the chin jerk men use when affection is too expensive. "Congrats, Dad," he said, half chew, half sincere. Lily ran over, crown tilted. "Look." She thrust a paper plate toward me. "We got the good frosting." Then, like an afterthought, she remembered to switch channels. "Did you get your hat? The square one?" "I did," I said. "It looked exactly as dumb as advertised." She giggled and ran back to the gravitational pull of sugar. Erin moved closer, touched my arm, her palm cool from holding a drink. "We were just about to do candles," she said in the tone you use to talk a skittish animal out of the road. "Then we'll head to dinner, okay?" She squeezed. "Proud of you." "Thanks," I said, and tried to paste the moment into a scrapbook so it would count. Her eyes searched mine for something she could fix quickly. I didn't know where to point. Someone dimmed the lights. The room gathered around cake. 1, 2, 3, and a choir of voices did their best with a song that ages out of tune. Jess closed her eyes for a wish she could afford to make without witnesses. Erin's hand found my back for a second. There, gone, the way you test a wall for level. Candles went out. Cheer went up. Plates slid from a stack like shingles. The knife made clean math. I stood by the console table and watched the diploma case look boring. A cousin I barely know asked what my degree was in as if he were checking a weather app. "Business," I said. "With late nights." He laughed, said, "Right on," and drifted to the beer cooler. Tyler yelled for someone to bring more ice. Lily asked if sprinkles counted as a topping or an opinion. Erin was refilling cups, the host muscle never resting. I picked up the case and opened it on the sly. Empty, of course. The paper will come later in the mail like a story that needs an ending you wait for. The inside smelled like new and plastic. I closed it carefully, set it down again, and watched my reflection in the TV screen. A man in a suit among shorts, a square hat ghosted on the credenza, a smile that had been in a room all afternoon with strangers, and was still trying to remember how to be real. Erin appeared at my elbow with a slice of cake and a fork stabbed into it like a flag. "Eat," she said, and kissed the side of my mouth in a way that was both public and private. "We'll leave in 20. I told Jess we'd meet you there if the kids wanted to stay a little longer." "Meet me?" I repeated, but softly, because the room didn't consent to heavy. She didn't hear or pretended not to. Jess raised her cup. "To Milestones?" she announced, and everyone echoed because echo is polite. "To Jess," someone clarified, and the room laughed, relief like air. I lifted my fork, because toasts are for carrying things you can't on your own. The cake was sweet enough to blur edges. In the doorway, the evening held steady. The house had learned to contain two truths without spilling, a party that belonged to someone else, and a degree that belonged to me. They stood next to each other like strangers at a bus stop, both headed somewhere, neither speaking. I wiped a bit of frosting from my tie and thought, not for the first time, how quiet applause can be when it uses the wrong hands. The road home knew me well enough not to ask questions. Late afternoon sun laid long gold bands across the asphalt, and the car hummed the kind of steady that makes room for thinking you didn't schedule. I set the diploma case on the passenger seat and buckled it out of habit, as if the thing might slide away if I didn't hold it. In the reflection of the windshield, I could see just enough of my face to know it was telling the truth. Traffic moved like a tired parade. Turn signal, merge, the choreography you do with strangers who don't need your story to let you in. I drove the speed limit because hurry had done enough this year. The radio stayed off. Silence has its own station, and today it played a highlights reel in the wrong order. There was the first night back on campus when I couldn't find the right building and followed a herd of backpacks until a door opened on the smell of dry erase and second chances. The afternoon Lily sat at the table with me, coloring a dragon while I colored a spreadsheet, both of us deciding where heat goes. The way Erin's hand would pass a plate into my study zone without crossing the border of a question. The quiz I failed and took again, and the laugh I let out when the number rounded my way like it finally remembered who I was. The phone buzzed once in the console, an automated campus survey asking how they did at making my day memorable. I almost laughed. I pictured section 112, row G, the programs I'd folded like little tents waiting for weather that never came. My mother's text pinged a minute later. "How was it? We'll toast tonight." As if you can cheers a missed note back into the song. I didn't answer yet. Some messages are safer in red. A stain on the passenger seat caught the sun, the ghost of a coffee spill from last winter when I memorized formulas at dawn, and the lid betrayed me. I left it there then as evidence. I ran a thumb along the edge of the diploma case now, feeling the fake leather pretend to be tough. Inside it was air, the paper to come later, the way institutions teach patience. Still, the weight felt real enough to argue for me. I turned onto our street, where the maples reached toward each other like old friends, and the houses know each family's weekend rituals. The porch light was off. It was too early for lamps to rescue anything. I parked, let the engine click itself cooler, and sat a minute longer than a man needs to in a driveway he pays for. The keys were warm in my hand. The case was warm, too. In the quiet cab, I told myself out loud so there'd be a witness. You did it. The dashboard didn't disagree. I took a breath that reached all the way down, gathered the case, and stepped into the evening, the kind of light that makes everything look briefly honest. When the candles were out, and the dishwasher was loaded with paper plates anyway, the house exhaled. Jess and her flock drifted to the porch. The music thinned to a phone in a bowl somewhere. I found Erin in the kitchen with her back to me, running water over a knife like it had misbehaved. I set the diploma case on the island so it could listen. "Why didn't you come?" I asked, plain as salt. She kept her eyes on the sink. "Mike, it was chaos. Traffic. Ty's stomach. Lily's dress. We would have been late. It's just a ceremony." The words landed with the soft thud of something that still breaks. "It's not just a ceremony," I said, and heard the crack in my own voice like an old stare. "It's the thing I've been pointing at for years. The thing I miss birthdays for. The thing I held on to when this house went to sleep without me. She turned, towel in both hands, like a flag she hadn't chosen. I'm not saying it's nothing. I'm saying we're stretched. Today had a lot of moving parts. Section 112, I said, quiet. Row G, 6 seats. I folded the corners on the program so Lily would find them. I put granola bars under 2 because arenas forget hunger. I managed half a smile that didn't stick. They didn't get eaten. Erin closed her eyes for a beat. When she opened them, she looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with dishes. We're proud of you, she said, reaching for my arm. I am. I told you this morning. Telling me and showing up are different verbs. She bristled at that, a small flare. So I'm a bad wife because I chose our kids not melting down over sitting 3 hours on plastic seats listening to names they don't know. I'm saying you chose a party over me, I answered steady. And I stood in a crowd of families and pretended the polite applause was ours. From the living room, Tyler laughed at something on his phone. Lily sang a sliver of the birthday song to the dog, off-key and sincere. The house was still a house, indifferent to adult geometry. Erin set the towel down and leaned on the counter like it might raise her. Do you want me to grovel? She asked, softer. Do you want me to say I'm awful? I misjudged. I thought later would be fine. I thought dinner would make it up. I touched the case, the way you touch a railing when the stairs feel unfamiliar. I want you in the picture, I said. I wanted your voice in the noise when my name was said out loud. I wanted our kids to see what finishing looks like from the inside. She looked at the case as if it might offer instructions. We can't rewind, she said. We can go to dinner now. We can toast properly. We can't unempty those seats. I let the sentence sit between us until it found its weight. This isn't about a meal. It's about whether the big things in my life have to fit around convenience. Her mouth trembled, not quite a frown. I didn't mean to hurt you. I know, I said and meant it. But intention doesn't change the view from row G. Water dripped from the knife onto the mat, a slow, regular tapping. Erin reached for the faucet and turned it off. The silence afterward felt earned. It didn't happen all at once. Patterns rarely announce themselves. They accumulate like mail you keep meaning to sort. After the kitchen went quiet, I took the trash out just to touch air that hadn't learned our argument. The night was doing its regular job, porch lights claiming small squares of darkness, a dog 3 houses down making his case about squirrels. I stood by the bins longer than anyone needs to and scrolled through a reel I hadn't ordered. There was the recital I missed years ago, because of a shift, the one Erin forgave, and then referenced every time she needed a trump card. The promotion party I planned for her in our backyard with fairy lights and Costco magic, the way I held my phone like a fan to get smoke out of the kitchen so the chicken wouldn't taste like apology. Tyler's championship where I left a meeting early and ran the last block to the field, tie flapping, arriving just in time to see his team hoist a trophy and his eyes scan the crowd and land on me like a landing he hadn't dared hope for. And me, alone at a work awards night when Erin texted, stuck, sorry, long day, and I smiled at a camera like I could hold my own frame. I'd told myself each time that life is messy and love is flexible and families bend like good lumber. Tonight, standing in a yard with a diploma case under my arm and the echo of, "It's just a ceremony," still wet, I realized the bend had become a bow in the wrong direction. I had built a house where my needs took the attic, present useful, out of sight. I'd kept paying the mortgage on that arrangement, with jokes and patience, and an extra trip to the store. I went back inside and passed the party's leftovers, the constellations of crumbs, the half cup of warm soda, Lily's paper crown slumped on a chair like a small kingdom between rulers. Erin was wiping the counter in circles again, smaller this time. "I'm going to take a drive," I said, gentle enough to keep the dog from standing. She nodded and didn't ask where. I didn't go far. Just to the community college lot where earlier that day strangers had made a room feel like it belonged to anyone who finished something hard. I parked under a light and opened the case, empty and full at once. The plastic smelled like new plans. I pulled out my phone and wrote 3 emails before I could talk myself out of any. The first was to HR, accepting the offer they'd floated contingent on the degree, title bump, different team, hours that didn't pretend evening was extra time. The second was to the alumni office, volunteering to mentor older students who were piecing their lives together between carpools and graveyard shifts. The third was to myself, a draft with a subject line that read boundaries and a first sentence that said, "You are allowed to expect being seen without furnishing proof." When I got home, the house had gone to bed, dishes stacked, lights off in that careful sequence we've learned by muscle memory. I set the case on my nightstand, and the cap beside it like a small square moon. Erin stirred when I lay down. "You okay?" she murmured. "I will be," I said, not unkind. In the dark, I could feel the outline of a life that still included this room, these people, and also a spine I could stand up in. Not a threat. A renovation. Tomorrow I would speak plain about what must change, and what I would no longer carry quietly. Tonight I slept with the window cracked, and a decision breathing in and out beside me, steady as a promise I could finally make to myself. I booked it on a Tuesday, because Tuesdays don't ask questions. A cheap flight, a carry-on that finally lived up to its name, a hotel with a window big enough to frame a sky. I didn't tell anyone until after I cleared security, and the bin had swallowed my belt and shoes like a magic trick that leaves you lighter. "Taking a couple days," I texted Erin. "Back Sunday. We'll talk." 3 dots came and went. "Okay. Be safe." Arrived, small and sincere. The plane lifted, and the city shrank into a tidy story. Clouds erased the neighborhoods where our arguments keep their furniture. I opened the laptop and closed it again. Work could wait its turn. I watched the wingtip write a line through weather, a sentence about direction that needed no witness. I chose a place by water because water knows how to move on without disrespecting where it's been. The harbor welcomed me like it didn't need a backstory. I walked until my feet learned the new sidewalks, until coffee tasted like the map of this particular morning. I let myself be a man with nowhere to be but here. It felt like wearing someone else's coat and discovering it fits. I did the museum, but I didn't pretend to have thoughts about brushwork. I liked the rooms with benches where strangers practiced being quiet together. A painting of a lighthouse held my attention longer than it should have. It looked stubborn and necessary. I took a picture and sent it to no one. At lunch, I ordered the thing I wanted without calculating anyone else's menu math. The waiter called me Professor because of the blazer, and I let the mistake bless me. In the afternoon, I found a bookstore that smelled like rain and paperbacks. I bought a notebook with thick pages and wrote down sentences I'd been circling for months. I wrote them in pen, so I couldn't tidy them later. You are not selfish for asking to be celebrated. You do not have to audition for your life. Love is not the same as attendance, but attendance is a form of love. I signed my name at the bottom as if it were a contract and felt something unclench. At sunset, the water turned into a mirror that didn't lie. I stood on the pier while gulls negotiated and couples tried to teach their phones what gold looks like. I took out the square hat from my backpack, the same ridiculous mortarboard I'd stuffed there like a joke, and put it on. A kid pointed and grinned. His mom clapped once on instinct. I laughed, not at myself but with myself, the sound of a man who'd finally passed the test he kept giving away. Dinner was a stool at the counter of a place where the cook calls you boss and means human. I raised my glass of something ordinary and said, out loud but not loudly, "To graduating." Not from school. I'd done that. From the slow hunger for someone else's yes. The toast landed warm. No one needed to echo it for it to count. Back at the hotel, I set the diploma case on the desk and slid the empty into the light. I wrote today's date on an index card and tucked it inside. Paper comes later, they'd said. So does understanding. I slept with the window cracked to let in the city's soft engine, and when morning found me, it did not ask for proof. I put on my shoes, tied them like a man tying his own story, and went out to meet a day that didn't owe me applause to be good. A year is a strange tape measure. You don't feel taller while it's happening, but then you reach for a shelf you used to need a chair for and your hand finds it like it always belonged there. The new office had windows that didn't make apologies, a door that closed without making a point, a team that spoke about deadlines like weather, serious, manageable, not personal. On my first day I hung the diploma in its real skin, paper crisp, ink official, and laughed a little at the memory of fastening an empty case into a passenger seat so it wouldn't slide. You keep some rituals, you retire others. Work fit different. I brought the me I decided to be instead of the me that might please a room. I said no when no was true, and yes when yes didn't require a costume. Time stopped treating me like a trick question. I left at 5 some days without writing an essay about it to no one. I mentored 2 students who were me in other shoes. We met at a diner with coffee that didn't need to be good to do its job. I told them the parts no syllabus covers, how to keep going when applause is busy, how to build a spine out of small, daily steel. At home, the furniture shifted. Not dramatically, no slammed doors, no cardboard boxes. Just new angles. Aaron and I did the unglamorous work of sanding down habits. We sat at the table and negotiated the calendar like a peace treaty we both wanted to last. When I said, "I need you there," she didn't hear accusation. She heard a date and wrote it down in ink. When she needed a Sunday to breathe, I said, "Go," and meant it without a ledger. Love didn't get louder. It got clearer. The kids grew like they were trying to prove a point. Tyler started asking me to proofread essays he pretended weren't important. Lily learned what a Gantt chart was, and made one for her science fair project with the seriousness of a general. There were still moments when the old reflex woke up and looked for a scan of the room, hungry for a nod to greenlight my worth. It didn't last. I'd catch it, pat its head, and send it to the couch with a book. At a work summit, someone introduced me as the guy who shipped that turnaround, and I didn't minimize it or make a joke with a bow on apology. I said, "Thank you," like a full sentence, and walked to the podium with both hands free. One evening, almost exactly to the day, we went to the college because Lily's orchestra played in the same hall where I had learned what emptiness weighs. Section 112 was there, unchanged and completely different. I looked at the seats and didn't feel a pull in my chest. I felt gravity, the regular kind. After the concert, Lily asked if we could take a picture in the exact spot. We did. Aaron's arm was around my waist, easy as breathing. Tyler, taller than my shoulder now, grinned without hiding it. I didn't check the photo to see if I looked like enough. I knew I did. Walking back to the car, the night had that late spring confidence where even the air believes in second chances. Erin slid her hand into mine. "You seem settled," she said, not fishing, just noticing. "I brought my own chair," I said, and she laughed because the metaphor matched the man. At home, the diploma on the wall caught a slice of lamp light and didn't have to prove anything. When I stepped into rooms after that, boardroom, kitchen, auditorium, I didn't look for a signal. I carried one. And the strange mercy of it all was this: other people's yes sounded better when it wasn't the only music I knew how to dance to.